and try it and see how it feels. And you know right away when something feels compelling to you. That word comes up a lot for me. Like, where am I compelled to go, in what direction? And listen to that. I also say this to new sewers, weavers, spinners, whatever it is. Um, do what you're compelled to do. And the ones that are not, listen to your intuition, listen to your intuition and honor that. That's
Hello, welcome to the New York Guild of Handweavers Member Spotlight. My name is Gigi Matthews. With over 250 members, the New York Guild of Handweavers provides inspiration, information, and mutual support to anyone interested in weaving, tapestry, spinning, or fiber arts through workshops and speakers and our lending library. For more information, go to nyhandweavers.org. Nancy Nagle works with various fiber art techniques to create one-of-a-kind art to wear. She dyes, spins, knits, crochets, and last but certainly not least, weaves colorful and inspired pieces that make the wearer and the viewer smile. Everything is created with a passion for color and a love of pattern and flow. Nancy says, "My friends call me the fiber whisperer. I love the magic that happens when you bring together colors and textures in unexpected ways." Nancy's website is nangelini.com, and you can find her on Facebook and Instagram as Nangelini, which is noted in the YouTube description for this video. So Nancy, welcome to the Member Spotlight series.
Thank you.
And I just noticed you're in the room where you weave, and there's a couple of looms behind you. So maybe we could start by I know people will be curious, just tell us what those looms are.
Well, my newest loom is behind me, this AVL. It's an A series with a CompuDobby 3, and it has 40 shafts. I purchased this from a very experienced weaver in June of last year. So that's my newest loom. Behind me is the Leclerc. It's an 8 shaft. I guess it's a jack loom, I guess is what it's called. It's a Leclerc Nihilus 2. I also purchased that from my good friend Hetty Lyles, who is also a very accomplished weaver, and I felt like it had good juju. Both of them, I think, have good juju coming from wonderful weavers. On the table over here, you can't really see it, is an 8 shaft table loom that was made by a woodworker. So it's a handmade 8 shaft table loom. And then in the dyeing room, in my laundry room, I have a um, shot baby wolf, also HF, the one that folds up like an X, so you can actually tip it and put it in your hatchback and drive it to a weaving class. So there's the baby wolf.
Wow. Well, that sort of feeds us into my first question, which is, how did you get started in fiber art? And tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I grew up with artists, so I come by it honestly. My dad was an art professor for 31 years in Miami, and um, before that, he taught grade school and high school art. And my stepmom was a fine artist and did amazing, beautiful, detailed drawings and portraiture and all kinds of things. And now, later in life, she does some printmaking. And My mother was a poet and also did some art of different forms. She was a needle pointer for many, many years, always designing little vignettes. They almost look like patchwork quilts. She has a series of vignettes on each piece, and she would fill them in with intricate borders and little patterns in the middle, and just lots of color and pattern. So I definitely come by it honestly.
Oh, wow. That must have been fun as a child.
The fiber art I didn't get into until many years later. I did digital art and created sacred geometry mandalas for a period of time. And you asked how I found fiber art, and it began with the freeform crochet group on Yahoo groups. I met lots of amazing artists through this sort of international collection where we just had, forums where we would discuss things, and I'm still friendly with some of these people today, they're just amazing, and that's what got me
Oh,
into fiber art.
oh, wow. And what do you find most inspiring, or who do you find really inspiring as you went into fiber arts and even now?
Um, I guess there's many, many artists whose work I have admired and been, captivated by. And so in the very beginning, it was, like Prudence Mapstone and Margaret Hubert and, who's near you, she's in New York, and, Myra Wood, who's now back in Philadelphia. And there were many, many people creating this beautiful, knit and crocheted things with yarn. And then later, there are weavers whose work really pulls me along the journey, and, there's dozens of people, so I don't know if I should list them or not, but there's just so many beautiful, minds out there creating
That's true. And with social media today, you can just keep accessing more and more and more people.
and
Yeah.
continually finding people that's work I wanna follow and see their journey and enjoy the process, with them.
So, do you ever get stuck or discouraged on a project, or go through periods where you're not motivated? And if you do, how do you move through that?
Well, I absolutely do get stuck, and sometimes it's a part of the design process or a part of that design process that I'm not understanding or not fully integrating, and sometimes it's equipment related. For example, with the AVL loom and learning all of the bells and whistles and parts of the loom and how to make each of them work together with what I've designed and what I'm doing. So, my relationship to the struggles has changed over the years, and, um, I remember on the Leclerc HF loom in my old studio, I remember having a threading error or a complication in the design, um, and not sure whether it was a threading error or a complication in the design I had created. This was at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had done Margaret Coe has online classes, and I had done some classes on this chorus weave structure. Some of you guys have done it, I'm sure, with the Amy Norris and Margaret Coe designed this. It's a 3 parallel lines kind of design, and something wasn't working, and I distinctly remember laying in bed and crying because I didn't know how to fix what had happened, or I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew it was wrong, and I felt panic and frustration and nowhere to turn. And now, when the same thing happens, it feels much lighter. It feels like this is an obstruction to my path and a solution will come. A solution will present itself. If I have to ditch this whole warp, another warp will come. I'll make another warp. So the tangles in the yarn, the things that used to infuriate me or exasperate me, now at this age, I'm a little bit more like, keep moving forward. I tell myself this verbally out loud. I say, keep moving forward. You know, something will present itself. And even just this year, um, at the end of last year, and I was leaving town and I was putting this giant hand painted, two hand painted warps on this giant loom, and it was 20 yards long, and something wasn't right, and nothing was working, and nothing was working, and I had to walk away and give it time, and I woke up in the morning, after several days of not knowing what the trouble was, and I looked at the beams that the warp has to pass over to make a straight line in through the heddles and the reed, and I had missed a beam and didn't go over it, so the funniest part of this is it's not the first time I've missed the back beam going over it and had things at the wrong angle. It happened on the Leclerc, and it happened to my friend who I bought the Leclerc from. We both have had, "Oh, we missed the beam, and we have to." So there's often a solution that you're just not seeing, and this is a theme that comes back around again and again in my life. Sometimes you just have to look at it from a different perspective, and then there's the solution. You wake up with the answer, you get out of bed and you're like, "Did I go over that back beam? That's what happened." It's
That's a really great
embarrassing.
piece. Oh, no, but that's great wisdom because, to have somebody who is so experienced with weaving that they're weaving on a 40 shaft loom and you can still, make a little error or just knowing that you'll figure it out. That's part of weaving, right? Problem solving.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's why many of us are drawn to it is drawn to it, because we like that finding the solution. We like puzzles.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Wow. Well, I think you've just given a lot of weavers a lot of hope here. They'll just
I don't know,
keep
I made
going, just
myself
keep going.
laugh.
So, what impresses you or inspires you when you look at other fiber artists' work?
I'm really captivated by, techniques that I don't fully understand, and I wanna know more, that where I'm drawn in, and I'll take off my glasses, I'm really myopic, which is helpful, and I'll look at stuff and how did they do that? And I wanna know, I wanna have maybe not a thorough understanding, but at least a gross understanding of what's happening with the threads, with the components. What is that fiber they're using, What did they upcycle and convert into a piece of their art? That pulls me in, and, when people can transcend that, the materials, the color, the structure, the pattern, they're transcending something. They're integrating something in a new way. That also pulls me in and inspires me. And when I see folks doing this, it makes me want to do more with my own work, to incorporate some of those elements, or at least the energy that they're coming from with this. It makes me want to utilize that to include, include more in my work.
It sounds like you don't get stuck from a creative point of view. If you get stuck, it's more from the loom or a technical point of view. But it sounds like ideas and inspirations are always bursting into your realm.
There's a balance between this and this, like, coming from the heart. Your hands are an extension of your heart. Literally, the energy of your heart comes out through your hands, and the stuck part, the feeling stuck, is when I'm too much up here and I need to bring it back down here. And that's when I go and I don't come in the studio. I sit on the couch and knit hats, or I spin and then I knit hats from the hand spun, because that is taking me out of my thought process. I can knit hats in my sleep. I'm not thinking, I'm not overthinking, and spinning for sure. My hands know what to do. I don't spin beautiful lace weight that's consistent. I don't spin even sport weight or worsted weight necessarily. It's lumpy and bumpy, and it's whatever comes out of my hands, but it checks my brain out a little bit and lets it all come out of my heart and my hands, and that's my medicine. That's my unsticking myself.
Yeah,
I'm
I
getting
think that
verklempt.
that's literally true as well, because if you're doing something that you can just let go and be in the moment, it puts you into a different part of the nervous system and the parasympathetic side. And yeah, so
So there's some
that
science behind my espousing.
so um what would you say to people then starting out in fiber art or working with fiber? Like if they're just beginning, a lot of our guild members join because they're not yet a weaver. They love textiles. They would like to, and it's a great way to learn to weave is to join a guild, and then you have all of these resources, all of these amazing people around you. So, what advice would you give to say your earlier self starting out, or somebody now?
When I meet somebody that's new to it or says they have some curiosity about weaving, I do tell them about our local guilds, And I also I like to say you find what brings you the most joy and follow your joy. Follow the path that lights up for you. So somebody said to me, a longtime weaver and internet friend, Noreen Cronfinlay said, get a little potholder loom and try weaving on the potholder loom some of your hand spun to see how you like the way the hand spun looks. Just get a little cheap potholder loom and then try, get a rigid heddle and try it on that, and then put it on the big floor loom and see and just play. Because I had hand spun and I knew I wanted to see how, and so whichever aspect is lighting up for you, that's what I tell new folks is like, just start with something, even if it's small, and try it and see how it feels. And you know right away when something feels compelling to you. That word comes up a lot for me. Like, where am I compelled to go? In what direction? And listen to that. I also say this to new sewers, weavers, spinners, whatever it is. Um, do what you're compelled to do. And the ones that are not, listen to your intuition, listen to your intuition and honor that. That's your next step, what your inner guidance is telling you to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point because it's easy to get caught up in all of the technicalities, especially in weaving, and forget what brings me joy. Yeah, yeah. So then I should mention you're actually a member of two guilds, three guilds, which we can do nowadays because of Zoom. The Philadelphia Guild, which is closest to you, the Handweavers of Bucks County, and then, of course, the New York Guild as well. So, just personally, what does being a member of a guild mean to you? Why are you in guilds?
It keeps me, in a way, out of my head of the little focus that I have, the things that I do. I am exposed to these guest speakers and lecturers and teachers that come in through these different guilds. And then also, um, topics and mediums that I wouldn't otherwise experience or even know about. The movie night. Some of this is, we've had movie nights through New York and Philly and through MAFA that are people that aren't alive anymore, or people that I would not have heard of or known about, who have changed my perception of art and weaving and fiber art and all of this. I forgot the question.
What being a member of a guild means to you, which is all fantastic answers, actually, what you just said.
Just to name drop a couple too, the the teachers that were coming to Bucks County, some of them also came to the Philly Guild, but I did a class at the Philly Guild and the Bucks County Guild from Denise Kovnat, and I had met her also at MAFA one year. And when she came to both Philly and Bucks County, I wanted to take both of those classes. So I joined the Bucks County Guild. And then Catherine Weber was doing a class at the Bucks County Guild. And those two women changed my weaving completely, between painting the warps with Catherine Weber and Denise Kovnat and the parallel threading. It's like advancing point twill parallel threaded with painted warps. And I've done Zoom classes with her and other stuff. But both of those women, their work is so incredible, their body of work, and changing how and what they're doing and evolving with the times and all of that. That's a big part of being in the guild, is being exposed to these people that influence us and help sculpt and mold what we're doing, you know?
Yeah, that's very true. And the different guilds have different approaches. New York does the speaker and the show and tell. Philadelphia doesn't do the show and tell, but they have in-person classes, and it all varies. Every guild is different. Yeah. Well, before we get into actually looking at your work, which is so, I'm so curious now because you've touched on all these different things, so it'll be great to actually look at the work. But what's ahead for you in your work? What's on your mind these days?
I still and have always loved pattern, color and pattern, and tessellations and symmetry and sacred geometry. So with this AVL, I've been doing some of these things I didn't know if I could do, which I do in my dyeing, like 60-degree and 120-degree angles that are like six-fold symmetries in a lot of sacred geometry, flower of life. And so I did start doing it now that I have 40 shafts here, but I hadn't ever considered it because you've got right angles all the time in weaving and trying to get things to be a six-fold symmetry on a 90-degree four-fold symmetry kind of structure. Um, anyway, I'd like to do more of that and play with more of the sacred geometry, but I'm trying to wrap my head around dodecahedrons and five-fold symmetry and some other things. I'd like to include that. And I'd like to grow a little more to include more of sewing with my hand wovens. And another huge inspiration for me and help mold some of what I'm doing is Daryl Lancaster, whose work I love, and her pattern designing is beyond compare. And I would like to hone my skills a little bit in my sewing of my hand wovens to make things other than rectangles. Um, that is sort of in my mind as things I'd like to pursue, but I am still such a novice sewer that it's always intimidating, and I have to take baby steps and sew other people's cottons, that are beautiful. And anyway.
Well, let's have a look then at now that everybody's heard the words, let's have a look at the actual pictures. So I'm going to share my screen. We can just talk about some. I've started with the sacred geometry illustration. So talk about this. It's beautiful.
So I drew that on black paper with Prismacolors, probably back around 97 or uh yeah, 98, 97, 98. And I scanned it and sort of knocked out the background of the black paper and tweaked it a little bit in Photoshop. Um, and it had underneath the design, it had the flower of life structure or the seed of life, which is like you start with a circle and six interlocking circles around it. And so when I would draw on black paper, I would draw the basic structure with a compass and ruler first, and then add in lines and then erase what's not needed. And so there was I guess like weaving, there was always an underlying structure behind it. Um, And this was a part of a series of cards I did, affirmation cards, that had mandalas and affirmations printed below them. And the affirmation that went with this image was change feels good.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well, let's see how it translates into weaving. And that's a flower of life weaving, right?
It is. So this warp is threaded in an interleaving pattern. So it's a gold and sort of smoky blue warp every other thread. So there are some um, other patterns that sort of shift and arise behind the flower of life. But in this image, you can see the yellow petals of the flower of life.
And this is done on the AVL loom.
This was done on the AVL, and I used a pink, sort of magenta weft. So it's kind of crossing that CMY color spectrum. You're supposed to stay within two of the CMY, the cyan, magenta, yellow, but I crossed into all three with this one. And I just wanted to see what would happen, which is kind of what happens with most of my weaving. I just want to see what happens.
Yeah, that sense of play. Let's just play.
Exactly.
And these ones, the color is beautiful combinations that you've chosen.
Thank you. Those were both done with the same threading, slightly different pattern. But the warps, I called that my patina warp. So the warp threads were a sort of turquoise and rust rayon. And then the weft on the bottom is this crimson tencel, and the weft on the top one was the smoky blue cotton, which I later used in the warp. And you get such a different look on the same warps with the different weft colors.
Do you have like a particular favorite yarn that you like to use, or again, you're just playing and trying out different things?
Most of my warp have been 10-2 cotton, 8-2 tencel. I'll use 8-2 rayon. I cotton rayons. I do have silk, and I'll throw that in periodically. I'm working toward using more and more of the silk. I love the drape of the tencel and the rayon, and the cotton. And I'm also moving towards some finer threads. So I'll use for weft sometimes the 24-2 cotton, or I'll double that and use that one. Um, it's a continual process of playing and experimenting, and I don't like to do the same thing twice. So I could never be a production weaver because I just keep wanting to try the next thing and the next thing. And if I'm not going to change up the pattern, I'll change up the weft considerably, and either how many picks per inch. And I've forgotten the question again. Sorry, Gigi.
Oh, just on the different types of yarns that you would prefer, but it just sounds like what you like to do is just play. Just try, try, try.
I do, and I want to upcycle all of these yarns that are in my stash that I've been accumulating, you know.
Oh, that's a very good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. So what's going on here? This
So
is a real splash of color.
this was the second ever warp on the AVL. The first warp I put on was just one set of blue that was thicker. This one was about 20 yards of two painted warps. One was all warm colors and one was all cool colors. So, and it's an interleaved threading. So I was trying to design a couple different patterns, but and this was based on some of the information from Margaret Coe's class. She has classes on using Photoshop elements to insert different weave structures within a pattern that you create. But of course, I push the envelope and I try things that may or may not work. And these definitely were me pushing that envelope. And I'm happy with the results. I have to say, I'm really happy with them. They were both rayon in the warp. And then the wefts, I think I was primarily using the 24-2 cotton um, on these. And they were a part of my learning curve. So, um, I'm pleased that I learned so much from that warp, and I will dye more warps again, possibly with a little less color, fewer color changes. But it's part of my learning curve, and I hope they get worn and, loved by their whoever buys them or receives them. You know what I mean?
And you painted these warps or you bought them pre-painted?
No, I did paint these. I dyed these. I skeinified. So there were 20 yards and I wound them up like a skein, and side by side I dyed them. So where there was red, the corresponding warp had some green. I don't know. You can't see my cursor, I don't think, but on the left side of the left piece, there's green and red together. And then where there was purple on the warm warp, there was yellow on the cool warp. And um, I hoped for the best, and I got some really exciting results.
Really is. They're just beautiful. We have to
Thank you.
keep moving though, because there's so much wonderful stuff to look at. Here you're going like really bright. This is incredible. It's like a sunset. It's amazing.
So this one, the warp, this was on the Leclerc, the HF Leclerc. The warp was a color gradient. So it went from, and some of the warp threads were hand painted and some of them were commercial yarns, but I mixed different fibers, and there was some pink silk, and it moved into like a magenta cotton, and there was some wool that was raisin color, and then some blues and greens, and it went all the way. It ended with the green on the lower right. You see the green in the warp on the right hand side. So by having that color gradient as one of my warps, and the secondary warp, because it was parallel threaded, was gold tencel. So that was the first time I had to reorder gold tencel while winding a 28-yard warp. 28 yards I did of this. The warp winding took longer than anything else. And then in this piece, the weft was um, a red lace weight hand knitting wool, merino wool. It might have been wool cashmere blend. But I had this lace weight wool and I wove with that as the weft. And so it created this really vibrant piece, but you still have that color gradient sort of peeking through. And if you wear it this way on the left, you get that green around your collar. But if you were to flip it, you'd have the more vibrant pink and red around your collar if you wore it the other way.
This one really reminds me that you grew up in Miami, the
It's called
colors.
Wide Awake. That was the name of that shawl. I think this one's still available on my website.
Oh, it's lovely.
Thank you.
And here we've got rainbow.
So this is from the warps were dyed by Catherine Weber, who does amazing. Blazing Shuttles is her company, and she does amazing hand painted warps. So I put my baby wolf in the car in the hatchback and drove down to North Carolina to take a class with her at her mothership. And some of these warps were my leftovers after the class. In the class, we wove and learned how to use her hand painted warps on the loom in different color stripes. And after I got back from the class, because it was much more right angles and grid kind of thing, was the draft for the class. So after I got home, I used my leftover warps, which you can always do with Blazing Shuttles warps. They always work together. So I used my leftovers to design a new draft with this pattern. And I plugged in, I had some rainbow warp left over from her and some other colors, and they all worked so well together.
And is this your own pattern or one that you used from?
This is my own design. I do look at handweaving.net. I'm a huge fan and subscriber of that website. There's so many wonderful tools on handweaving.net. But I go in and to Fiberworks. That's my program of choice, and I design my own drafts. And because it's threaded parallel, it creates some, I'm using my cursor and you can't see it. It creates some interesting color play. So there's some blue and purple playing together in different areas. The colors overlap in beautiful ways. And there's a kind of serendipity. You plan all this order, and then you get the serendipity of what happens when you weave it.
That's really fun. So that as you're weaving, you're surprising yourself.
That's part of the joy of it. That's why it's so captivating.
Yeah. Oh wow. Oh, I I could keep looking, but we got to keep moving. Look at this one. This is Heirloom Tomatoes, right?
Yes. That was a real early piece. So many years ago, I had a yarn store on South Street in Philadelphia, and I would take the hand knitting yarns and weave them. So I had a black warp. I was also very inspired by the Saori weavers. So that being in the moment with it and weaving in a very freeform style, I had come out of that whole freeform crochet way of thinking. And this was inspired by the Saori principles of um, let's look out with eyes that shine and all of those wonderful principles of Saori. So I warped my loom with this black thread, and I left a big gap of like 8 or 12 inches in the middle of my loom, and then had another series of warp threads. So when I would weave, I had these long floats across, which made the fringe. And when I was done weaving, I had two scarves, and I would cut down the middle to separate the two, and they each scarf had long fringe. And the weaving structures, I just had a point twill on the loom, so I could do some plain weave and some point twills in there. And this was all on a 4 shaft loom. This wasn't an 8 shaft loom. This was all done on a 4 shaft loom. And it just was great fun. So I did a whole series of these using up all the leftover yarns from my spiral shawls I would crochet when I had the store. And all my leftover yarns, even if there was just a tiny bit, there's some silk ribbon in here or tiny bit of hand spun, I could plug it in little bits and pieces. It was a great upcycling project.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm all about the sustainable angle, and that shows that being in working in a sustainable way can lead you down into these creative paths and surprises, as well as doing the right thing. Wow.
Thank you.
And here now we're going away from the weaving into, you're a very well-rounded, all-round fiber artist. So talk about this incredible, incredible, amazing piece.
I'm laughing at the well-rounded all around because I was making a lot of round things between mandalas, and this was a knitted lace mandala. Um, I knitted lace and I designed some. This one might have been one I designed, but often I was looking at I think it was yarnover.net was the old website that had vintage patterns and Herbert Niebling books and Marianne Kinsler books of knitted lace. And I realized having a yarn store for 10 years, I realized people would knit beautiful lace shawls and put them in a drawer for a year and wear it once a year. Or give them as a gift, and the recipient was afraid to ever wear it because it was fragile and beautiful. And they take so many hours to knit lace shawls and they never get utilized. I wanted to put them on the wall as art. And being a mandala lover and the whole circular and symmetry thing, and I love to knit in the round, I started to crochet a little border and stretch them. And here you can see there's PEX tubing. And I wound up wrapping the PEX tubing with either ribbons, or I would crochet a kind of rayon seam binding around them, or do something to decorate the borders and hang them. I often made them out of hand spun yarn, definitely out of hand dyed yarns. But this was a big staple of what I was doing when I had the store. And that's a shot of the store behind, and you can see the awning on the left there of the storefront. Um, this was around 2010 or 11, and it was right before I got into weaving. So I made a whole series of mandalas and then these knitted lace mandalas. And then at some point, my focus shifted into the weaving and dressing looms and all of that.
But I can still see the continuity between that sort of complex patterning, whether
Mhm.
in knitting or in weaving. Oh, it's lovely.
Thank you.
And this is a really fun series of pictures. This is you, right?
That's me. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a spiral shawl. Also was a staple when I had the business. I would take all the leftover yarns from knitting hats or balls of yarn in the store, or a customer could pick 10 or 15 balls of yarn, and I would make them a spiral shawl from the yarns they chose. And it was a way of combining color and texture. This one has a spiral on the back, but sometimes it was just more of a bullseye design. And the way this pattern is concocted, the sleeve openings are offset. So they're around 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And you can wear it the long way on the left or the short way on the middle bottom. And it's a bolero jacket if you wear it the short way. And when you've got it the short way, you've got this ginormous collar that you can flip up and wear as a hood, as is on the lower right there. So customers love to try stuff on and have you dress them and flip it this way and pull it that way and stick a shawl pin in it. And people just love to get wrapped up in something warm and cozy that was made with lots of love and colorful stuff. And that was this.
That's actually the foundation of textiles, isn't it? When we're babies, we're wrapped up in textiles there with
We're
love.
swaddled, yes.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And here's some of your hand spun, which I have an affinity for being a spinner, but it's again, here comes this vibrant, wonderful sense of color. Talk about your spinning, because you're as much a spinner as you are a weaver.
So this is Lester Longwell locks. I was buying the lamb's wool from Marcus the sheep on Berry Hill Farm, which I can't even remember what state they were in. It's possible that they were in Minnesota or Michigan. It's terrible. I don't remember that. But I remember the sheep was Marcus, and I got his lamb's wool fleece, his first shearing, and then his yearling fleece also. And it was undyed, and I dyed it. I scoured it or whatever, and soaked it, and then I dyed it. And I just love pulling apart the locks and teasing them apart. I probably don't do it right or the way a spinning teacher would teach, but I do it my way, and I would pull them apart while I watched a movie and put them in a bag, and then I would just spin them sort of the way my hands wanted to. And then I would go back and ply them in the other direction to sort of lock them in place. Often I'll knit them into something, so they don't have to be super duper secure. I do rinse them and thwack them after I spin, but it's really about the joy of it. I love the colors. It kind of looks like my hair. Um, I love how it feels. I just love every aspect of it.
Yeah, that one just it just should be called joy. I name my hand spuns. Yeah, that is it, and it is, it's very tactile, it's yeah, oh boy, okay, so we'll in the interest of time, because I could just do this all day, it is so joyful, but we'll move down to the foundations of the fiber arts, which is the fiber itself. And I was surprised to learn you came to dyeing fairly recently.
Yeah. When I had the store, I would buy the merino top from R.H. Lindsay, who happens to have the warehouse in Philadelphia, because the website says they're in New Hampshire, and he's like, "Oh, go see my brother. He's in Powelton Village." So I would buy pounds and pounds and pounds of merino top, the 64s. It's like a 21 micron. It's beautiful. But I would give it to a friend of mine, Tiny Airplanes. She, who now does embroidery and she doesn't spin anymore, but she was local at the time in Philly, and she would dye all of this merino top for me. Now, this picture is my hand dyeing. So around 2017, I started dyeing myself, but for years between '05 and maybe 2010, I gave it to her and we would split the wool. She'd give me half my wool back and keep half to spin. And that was, her payment for dyeing it all for me. And I spun great stuff from the same merino. This one may have been Rambouillet, which I think is just French merino, but I like to say Rambouillet. And I spun some of this and knit the hat out of it. The colors are very similar to that Marcus Lester Longwell locks in the previous picture. But, well, I do gravitate toward the same colors again and again. But these were just sort of, there's some rainbow in the back or attempts at rainbow. I'm not a professional dyer and I don't sell the top because I don't think I do it perfectly. It might get a little felted in my trying to get all of the dye out or whatever, but it was a learning curve. And so all of that got spun up or carded. I love to card bats. The drum carder is probably my favorite piece of equipment, and I love to card bats. So this probably got carded up with some silk and some Angelina. And it certainly is a joyful part of the process. I don't do it a lot, but I do circle back to it periodically.
And you bring a good point that although we're talking about fiber arts, dyeing, spinning, weaving, and then knitting or crochet are all completely different in terms of how you go about doing them, and they're different, completely different skill sets. And dyeing is not easy. You know, people think, oh, you just throw dye onto some fiber, but it's not. It's actually very complex in its own way. So let's go on to some of the fabric dyeing. So this is this is just a kaleidoscope of things here. So how did you achieve this on cloth?
So I guess technically it's shibori folding. Um, but there's something in my brain that puts it all together, the sacred geometry, the origami nature of folding, but I guess in shibori is a resist. It's a way of resisting through the folding, and the way you fold the fabric is going to create tessellations. Another one of my favorite things in the world is how these things, how the patterns repeat, how they mirror each other or themselves. And so each of these four pieces was folded slightly differently. But you can see there's six-fold symmetry. The one on the bottom is a four-fold, the bottom left is four-fold symmetry. But I mean, it's easy to learn and it's easy to jump in and get amazing results. And so this is really my answer for everything. You could ask me any question, and my answer is there is a joy between or in the combination of planning your warp and your draft and your design, planning by folding the cloth and clamping it. You can see little clamp resists on the bottom too, where there's circular designs or square designs on the right. Oh, from the clamps, you plan and you fold and you design, and it's all very intellectual and linear. And then you apply the dye, or you start actually weaving your structure on the loom, and there's a serendipity. There is forces beyond our control that happen in the interleaving of the threads, interthreading of the way things come together is that serendipity, the way the dye hits the cloth, the way the liquid, the amount of water, the gravity, the ice, whatever you're using, and the rinsing out of the dyeing. So that order and almost chaos, I call it serendipity, come together and you get sometimes unexpected results. And it definitely is the sweet spot. It's the thing that compels me to keep moving forward. You can't control everything. You do all your order and planning, and then you let it go and release it and see what happens.
Yeah, that's part of the enjoyment of doing it. So it's not just about the finished result. It's about the whole journey, and it's such a rich journey of creativity.
And that's a
Wow.
really important point. I also like to hold that idea, enjoy the journey. So enjoy each aspect of it. How many weavers do you know that say, I love to weave, but I hate to warp? And I've learned you have to train yourself to enjoy the journey, embrace the parts that are challenging or time consuming.
That's absolutely fiber arts is a metaphor for life. Yeah.
Amen to that.
Well, thank you, Nancy. This has just been so much fun and color and positivity, and it's been just wonderful to do this interview. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
So, are you up to some weaving for the rest of the day?
I'm actually moving heddles off the edges of my loom at the moment. That's my little journey at the moment.
Oh, that's wonderful. It goes all the little things, moving heddles, all these tiny little technical things, all the way through this serendipity of color and texture. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you.